Hello and welcome. My name is Jill Power, and on behalf of Heidrick Struggles, we're thrilled to present a special session with our Heidrick Digital team today. Before we begin, some housekeeping items. Please feel free to resize the speaker and presentation windows in our webinar console on your devices. This session will be recorded, and a recording will be made available to you shortly after today's session. Following their presentation, Maria and Kamal will open the floor for a Q&A. If you'd like to ask a question, please enter it in the chat box below. Thanks, everyone. To begin, I'd like to introduce Maria Howard. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Jill, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Maria Howard. I'm a partner and general manager with Heidrick Digital, and we're really focused on how to drive the digital transformation of leadership by blending technology with leadership science, and therefore transforming people management across the talent lifecycle. I've spent my career focusing on how to accelerate the readiness of leaders and organizations and increase the representation of diverse leaders at all levels. And as we continue to see this change-driven and at times turbulent external environment, we know that technology and innovation are critical to how we ensure a world better led. I am thrilled to be joined by Kamal, our partner from Eightfold, a brilliant mind around the criticality of talent intelligence. So Kamal, I'll pass it over to you for an introduction.
Absolutely. Thanks, Maria. Don't know about the brilliant part, but yes, it has been very interesting times to actually look at both talent as well as leadership. And I've actually really enjoyed our collaboration on how you're bringing all the data, all the methodology on leadership development to an AI platform. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to discussion in a few minutes.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we set the context of why is navigating leadership change with technology critical? You know, we've spent a lot of time, and Kamal, you and I have talked a lot about this over the last few years of how do we manage leadership as an asset and improve that asset? And we've spoken to more than 2,000 clients globally, and we came to understand that the challenge with managing talent as an asset is because there's no systemic approach, right? There's no consistent data. We've got gaps at scale. It's fragmented across geos or business units. And most of the approaches are point in time. So there's never a single source of truth to talent that you have. And what we've learned in talking to clients is that there is a lot of urgency to address this. More than half of executives believe that between 25 and 50% of leadership roles will be redefined and reorganized in the next 3 to 5 years. That's a massive, massive amount of change. And so the next question is, well, are you ready for that? And as you'll see here, fewer than half of the clients we talked to said that they have formal succession for CEO and direct reports, let alone broader populations. More than 70% said that learning and development was minimally or not at all linked to that planning. And almost all said that assessment and the data that comes with it wasn't properly weighted when it came to hiring or promotion decisions. So let's summarize the challenge. Organizations want to have better retention and promotion of talent, and they know they need a systemic approach to do that. They expect a significant amount of change in roles and org structures in the near term, but they don't have the planning, the development, the data in place to support it. And I want to add another layer, the current technology landscape, right? And Kamal, I'd love to hear from you. Tell us what you're seeing and how companies struggle to unify different data and systems to try to manage all levels of talent.
Great question. And I think even our experience has evolved and evolved very rapidly in the last 3 years, partly because of COVID and then the economic downturn and then all the other macro issues that are impacting all our businesses. So I think I used to have our elevator pitch, but I've now changed that. So when I'm in conversation with senior execs, all I tell them is that we have built an AI platform to answer these 5 questions for you. Number 1, what are my employees capable of doing today? Number 2, how can I provide a personalized growth path for everyone? Number 3, if I have to go outside for new talent, how do I do it with precision? Number 4, while I'm doing this, how do I become more diverse and inclusive? Because believe it or not, what's happening today is the biggest opportunity ahead of all of us for our organizations to become more diverse. And the last one is, how can my talent strategy keep up with my business strategy? So the visual that you have in front of us is the key that HR traditionally has been largely siloed. And while a lot of investment has been made in systems, they are all siloed. It's not all come together. And I think the thing that you are so good at is really understanding leadership, which in these are amongst the most turbulent, difficult times to actually keep the team together, keep them pointed, get the alignment, and then continue on the growth path while seemingly everything around us is changing and changing rapidly. Right. So I think the thing is, how can data serve us? And clearly, last couple of months, we've all been talking about Chat GPT and how it'll impact all our lives. And we can discuss that as well. But I think the key here is how can data tell us how to do a better job with the leadership? Because clearly, with remote, with hybrid, and a combination of all that work, there's even more pressure on leadership to keep the whole thing together and going. Right? And I love how you've actually shared some of the essence and a lot of the learnings from Heidrick, that how do you evaluate leadership? How do you determine succession planning? All of those things, if they're done with data and they're done with granularity that is good both for the management as well as the individual, I think we can unlock a lot of stuff for each other.
Well, I think that's the key. The paradigm has shifted, hasn't it? I think we used to think that the organizations sort of own the data, own the knowledge, have the power to make decisions. And I think that's really flipped on its head. Employees are demanding that they have more clarity, are demanding transparency to stay and continue to grow with an organization. And we definitely need that to be able to achieve growth with all of the turbulence that you discussed that's going on. So it's a complex picture, right? And we talked about the pace of change. And one thing that strikes me is the idea of how do we shift the paradigm from people processes to one of business continuity, right? We often think of business continuity as, planning for cyber attacks, the pandemic we all just went through. But at its core, it's really about understanding potential threats, risks to the business, and how do we proactively plan for that. And what strikes me is, isn't talent at the heart of this, right? If we don't have the talent we need to execute strategy or to adapt to the changing roles and requirements, competitive advantage wanes, shareholder value can wane, and our ability to deliver to our customer is impacted. And so the idea is, how do we create talent scenario planning, just as we would for other issues, right? How do we cultivate talent across different time horizons, different strategies, and have a process that's actually much more open to influence, to scrutiny, to really understand the implications of the decisions that we're making. And to me, what you said about data, that is at the core of being able to scenario plan, right? To drive an objective process. We can't remove bias. We can't leverage data if we don't have it at scale. And we want to achieve business continuity through our people. And I think that what's important is the outcome of this isn't about who, what individual, what name leads. It's about how a business operates and having the right people across the board driving the right things forward, given where you want to go. And so that's why I think reframing managing talent as an asset is important, because it's really about whether a company can step into its larger responsibilities, can deliver effective leadership and governance of the organization, knowing that we have a lot of change that's going to continue to come and things that we won't be able to predict. So I'd love to get your perspective on this. Do you see the need for a paradigm shift and therefore a shift in how we solve for these challenges?
Big time. And we now have several companies that have been around for over 100 years. Clearly, they're all big, right? Tens of billions of dollars in market value. So clearly, they've seen it all kinds of ups and downs, a couple of world wars, all of that stuff in that time frame. And clearly, they also have pivoted, expanded, shifted with the times. I'm seeing more urgency from these companies and their race towards embracing data. And I'll give you a couple of examples of what we are doing in our personal lives and how that marries to our work life now. First example is Tesla. right? The autonomous car that will come out eventually. I mean, it's already there, but it'll come out of the beta mode. So each of us will drive about million to million and a half miles in our lifetime, right? And from the time that we become like 25, we think we're an expert driver. We can do anything. A professional truck driver will drive about 8 million miles. And from the time that you got a driver's license, if all you did was get up in the morning, drive all day, at night go to sleep, get up in the morning again, drive all day, you'll drive about 16 million miles. That is the extent of how much we can learn from all the driving we can do. A couple of years ago, Tesla was learning from every mile driven by every car that they have. And a few years ago, that was about a few billion miles. Last summer of 2022, that number was about 22 billion miles, right? So think about the experience that will be there, and it will be safe and it will be sorted out. But that's the difference between what we think we know and we think we are experts to what we could know. And then we would really know it all. Now, same thing that's happening with ChatGPT. In the last 4 years, that has gone from a few 100 million data points from where it's learning to now a few, I think, couple of 100 billion data points. And clearly, the fact that it can translate from one language to another. Now, clearly, there's improvement to be made, but that's the extent of what it's learning. Large language model, right? Most of us, we barely know one language, maybe a couple. To think that you can do all of that with so much information and knowledge and be so perceivably confident about it, even though factually wrong sometimes, but it's only going to improve. And if we can actually bring all that learning on what our employees are doing, what are the career paths in our organization? When we hired a veteran, how did that veteran transition from the skills they learned in the military service to now? That goes a long ways in teaching us that, hey, this career path is viable. Clearly, they know a lot more about leadership, a lot more for us to learn. Who has done well when actually acquiring another company or an asset? Who did well in divestiture? Who did well in launching new products? All of those are both learnings and skill sets that are not often called out. And I think Heidrick actually has taught me a lot about the impact, that when you're looking at leadership development, it is about impact. So quantifying both qualitatively and in numbers wise, what did you do in that opportunity? That goes a long ways. And it changes your thinking on what does great look like. And also evaluate yourself, right? The self-assessment goes a long way. Self-awareness goes a long ways. And I think today when we work with our teams, that kind of transparency, honesty goes a long ways. Because you can't keep swinging and coming up with popular decisions. You just need to have consistency, and they're looking for that. And that, I think, should frame our leadership.
So I have something you said struck me, that we have employees that need that. We have this incredible capability to learn and leverage learning in huge data sets outside of just what we know. What holds us back from taking a different approach, from going in a more innovative direction? What do you think is getting in the way of what you just described?
Great question. I think it is the humility to know that we don't know it all. Right? So it's one thing to actually use AI to either automate or reconfirm what we think should be done. Because that's what a lot of the management has been in the past, that we'll tell you what we want out of our employees. The other paradigm shift, which is I think where things are going is, and all you had on your visual also, the employee surveys. If you're genuinely listening, you will do things differently, or at least align with what they're looking for, or figure out that, okay, if the company strategy is this, how do I align that with the individual aspirations? So I think that thing is more about listening better alignment, and being open to change. Because we all actually have gone through that, right? I mean, and I'm one of those who thought, hey, we're growing, everybody should be in the office. And then suddenly nobody was in the office, but you had to keep growing. Now, clearly it's hybrid. Now there's a lot of thing, hey, come back to work. Now some will, some won't. So clearly hybrid is here to stay. So leadership style, communication, you have to have additional time to make sure that everybody understands what their role is. So I think the leadership role is a lot more complex now than it used to be. And we need to account for that every day, every week, because it's needed. Second part is the data approach is going to be very different, because if you're willing to open your mind to what the team needs, what the company needs, I think the answers are often very different.
Well, it's so interesting that you talked about we have to embrace sort of these differences, right? And we do an annual Route to the Top survey, which really looks at CEO trends, right? And what we found was that over the past year, there are more and more CEOs who have C-suite experience outside of the traditional filler roles, right? CFO, COO. They're coming from places that, being a chief risk officer, chief strategy officer, roles that didn't even exist a handful of years ago, a chief technology officer, right? So we know that we need fresh perspectives. And to your point, we need a different view on how things can get done. And that only intensifies as we look across an entire organization, right? If we need that at the top, we certainly need to build that across an entire employee population. And it's, I would say, maximizing diverse experiences over the course of a career in an organization is nearly impossible without a digital approach, right? The ability to define, measure, track, apply experiences where they're most needed. No number of people or Excel spreadsheets can do that alone. And the second piece of this is what you mentioned earlier, which is how do we differentiate and understand the unique things that talent have done to make sure that we can execute with precision, right? So for many years, and I've built these with clients, we focused on competencies. What are the critical behaviors? But as you described this constant and changing landscape, new experiences and new areas of expertise are shaping how leaders drive impact to a business. Technological literacy, data-driven strategies, managing through a crisis, managing now remotely, right? These are things that maybe we weren't as focused on. And so it doesn't mean that competencies don't matter or culture and values don't matter, but without measuring impact, we miss the biggest differentiator where we can be really precise about how we deploy our talent and make better decisions. And that's what we've been doing for 70 years from a search perspective, right? Who's the leader who aligns, their impact aligns to the business strategy. But the opportunity we have now is to scale this, right? Which is why we've partnered together with you to build that platform so that we can understand the differentiation in a talent pool, bringing impact, competencies, potential all together, and then being able to apply that both to today, but future scenarios. So I'd be curious to hear when people use this approach, when they use a talent intelligence platform to understand their talent, connect it to the organization, and ultimately deliver more diverse talent, what's the ROI? What changes in an organization? What have you seen that's been transformative?
A few. Before I get into that, let me add something that what Heidrick has been doing without AI is actually that power of anonymized aggregate learning, right? Which is what our platform does. All the market learnings, everything that we are learning from our global data set and interactions, and bring that to the next line. And not about the individual, but what works and how to actually do a better and better job of matching people with roles. So you have been doing that in a very consultative fashion and have long-standing relationships with some of the largest organizations, that this is what leadership development looks like. These are the kind of characteristics and behaviors that lead to a successful leader. For this scale, for small company, big company, the context part, right? So you all have a lot of data that you are leveraging for that. Now, in our case, there are a few things that we are seeing very effectively. One was Dick's Sporting Goods. Actually, they did this session with us at HR Tech, where they shared how they determined, independent study first, what determines better store performance. And the store manager is the single biggest factor on determining how well a store does over a period of time. Then they started to distill down that what were the store managers doing, and exactly what you laid out, their career paths, learnings, behaviors, etc., that led to some of the stores doing much better than others. they have turned that into a template for their succession planning. And clearly there it's a matter of diverse experience and across all parts of it. And I think some of them were really tested because within weeks when COVID set in, uh, Dix was ready to actually switch to uh, stores or curbside pickup, right? How quickly people could place the order on the website, and the team was there to both take the shipment as well as deliver by the curbside. So that kind of pivot and agility is needed to actually manage stores very well. So there it's clearly leading to better store performance. Then Coca-Cola has also laid out succession planning, and they're in the midst of doing a global rollout. Very successful, very data-driven. Other pieces that we have seen with the granularity that we are talking about, that how can a talent intelligence platform provide a skills-based career path? That, hey, if these are your aspirations, these are the opportunities for you, whether you need to learn something or gain some experience and then expertise, so you are very well qualified for these things. That has led to a lot more better retention, a lot better internal mobility, plus the ability for the organization to invest more in diverse talent, right? The issue there is clearly, regardless of how well we mean, but if we keep looking for diverse candidates who have already done it before, there aren't enough. So you have to understand how to promote for potential, how to give them the opportunity so they will thrive when they have the role that they want. So all of those things are resulting in, like, Micron Semiconductors has done extremely well with D&I. And now the spectrum is Vodafone has hired more women in 3-4 months last year than they did all of 2021. And now clearly that number is much higher. A lot more clients have hired more veterans in very different roles that are in line with the aspirations of transferring veterans. Morgan Stanley is live, Starbucks is live. So the leadership does not come necessarily at C-suite level of a large company. Leadership comes at all levels. And how do you shape that so that you have more people feeling like they belong and they can do well and do it with confidence? And I think the granularity that you're bringing with both competency models and a lot of your methodology to marry that with our talent intelligence platform, that's, I think, absolutely the need that we have right now.
Well, it's interesting because I always talk about, how do we leverage high tech to go high touch? If you think about how we do, typical organizations are doing that today. We spend so much time trying to gather information, make sense of it, present it out. And then we actually have to start that cycle over again because something has changed or something's disrupted it. Where if we can automate that process and the time and resource that it takes to do that, think of all the time we have to do with what you talk about. We can do sponsorship, we can do coaching and mentoring, we can develop our leaders with intention. And so to gain efficiencies in the pieces that are actually slowing us down the most, that we have the biggest set of data that we can actually gather, so that we can shift and say, let's do the things that person to person are going to make sure they can make an impact. To your point, they have the confidence, belief, and they can see themselves growing with the organization. So, and data will build that bridge of neutrality, right? When we have information in front of us that we can both look at, that's a much safer place than when we're trying to just come up with it in a conversation. That's really difficult. That's really hard to pull off. And to your point, that needs to be happening at scale across an organization. One thing I've thought about is there's always these themes that come out in conversations that you're having, right? It doesn't matter what client you're talking to. It doesn't matter what industry or size they are. There's consistent things you hear. And one thing, there's probably two things I've heard over the last 12 to 24 months. One is we simply don't know what we have, right? And we've talked a lot about that already, of how do you make sure that you're measuring the things that matter, you're using a platform approach, and you're doing this at scale to unleash your talent. And every company, every single one I've heard say that, we don't know what we have. But the second piece, or maybe a build on that, is, and one leader kind of told this in a story that was really powerful to me. She said, Maria, what's keeping me up at night isn't the people who are walking out the door that we know, and that's regrettable. It's the people we don't know who are walking out the door, right? She said, we spend so much time often focusing at the very top levels, and that's important. But what you just said, leadership happens across an organization. It doesn't just happen from the top. And so we're missing, it's not even known to us who's walking out the door now giving somebody else a competitive advantage who could have been a future leader for us. And so it reminds me of a question that I was asked when I started, which was, who are the next 7 CEOs in your organization? And when you ask that question, you typically get, it's a horizon, it's the COO, it's the SVP of sales, right? But that's not what we're asking. We're asking who are the next 7 CEOs down, 7 layers down in an organization. And in my entire time of talking about this, which has been many, many, many years, I've never heard a CEO, a CHRO, a board be able to answer that question. And to me, that's the opportunity that technology brings, right? We can bring a real-time view of the full asset of your talent population, and it will help you start to identify those folks much sooner and ensure that you're investing in and developing them for your future. So those are couple of the things I'm hearing consistently. I'd be curious if you're hearing that as well, or what other consistent challenges are you hearing, and any advice you have for how we get unstuck from those tough things.
Yeah, great question. I think there are a couple of things that are coming out loud and clear. One is more interest among CEOs on becoming a skills-based organization. So one is not just the inventory of what do we have, but the second part is understanding the adjacency of skills and the learnability of skills. And just like you talk a lot about impact, the second part is learnability. When was the last time an individual learned something new? And how often are they doing that? To some extent, that's the best thing you can incent in your organization, because that will continue. Once that habit is there, most teams and leaders will grow and continue to grow and thrive in difficult environments. That's one. Second part is the thing that we need to drop now in today's world is this 2-page resume. Because we keep trying to construct these compound sentences with a few buzzwords or tons of buzzwords, but that is not really reflecting what we are capable of doing today. So the thing there is to actually document as much as possible, because that whole 2-page resume was so you're not killing trees, but hardly anyone prints anything, right? So why limit ourselves? And best example I can give you is when we came out of stealth mode 5 years ago. I got hold of the first resume ever written, and that was by Leonardo da Vinci from the Vatican Museum. And of course, it was written in Latin, and on the back was the translation in English. But the way he described himself it was almost as if he was a defense contractor, that he can make stuff, he can blow up stuff, he can make grenades, stuff like that, bridges. So a lot of construction descriptions. And at the end of it, he says, oh, by the way, I know how to paint as well. Now, he was a genius. Nothing in his resume said, you will all be lined up centuries after I'm gone to admire my masterpieces, right? So if he couldn't describe himself in more colorful language, how do we expect our lesser mortals to do that in 1 to 2 pages? So our thing is, go at it. All of us actually have a few hundred to a few thousand skills. And when we understand the context in which those were acquired and what we have done with those, that reflects our capabilities. And if we become very granular on what we are capable of learning and we can demonstrate those, I think sky's the limit on our potential. And I think that this thing is starting to resonate with more and more organizations because everybody's looking for digital skills. There aren't many people out there who actually have those or graduated. Blockchain is only a few years old, all that stuff, right? New things are coming up. Best thing is invest more in the current employees, including leadership skills, including development, so that they are growing. And now we have a lot of these larger clients who have been around for a long time, Fortune 100 companies. Any kind of job that you can think of is available in that organization. Different role, different function, different geography, all of it is there. But it all is a matter of how do you pair every individual with all the new opportunities that emerge. For that, you need scale. Fortunately, we have the AI platform that serves that. And then when you bring in your 70 years of data on leadership development, succession planning, success, impact, that's probably the best insights that can be delivered to any organization.
Well, I think and you may have used the word earlier, I think it's all about precision.
Yep.
Gone are the days of sort of general development. That's not going to get us to where we need to go. We need to be precise. And if you think about an individual where maybe they're fantastic in terms of their behaviors, or they've got great potential, but they need access to certain experiences, or they need exposure to a couple of things to be able to build that. Now, if I just put them through a kind of a generic program, one, they're already really good at those things, but that's not developing what they actually need to continue to contribute and grow. And so it's being able to be that precise, I think, which is the advantage that the platform can bring, that the technology can bring, because you aren't trying to peanut butter spread a solution. You can get hyper focused on each person. And that's incredibly empowering for them. What do I need to do to continue to be successful? And if you can give them a simple and clear answer, you're going to get a lot of loyalty. You're going to get people who want to stay and who want to continue to learn. One last question for you, and you mentioned it earlier, around what's coming next, right? We're still in earlier stages of embedding talent intelligence platforms and how to change into business continuity and move away from point in time. But what else is going to disrupt us? You talked about ChatGPT. I'd be curious where you see the future going.
A lot of changes, and actually at a much faster pace. I think the thing that we're seeing right now is a lot of the technology investments are now starting to come to a head. And in the next few years, a lot of things will change. So this thing with ChatGPT and generative AI, yes, more work needs to be done to get it to a very stable, reliable state. But what it's already showing is what's possible. What it does mean is a lot of jobs will change, guaranteed. And that also means a lot of the leadership and how you manage a team, which is part AI, part people. So you are now more into verifying content rather than writing content or creating it. Images, pictures, creative stuff. All of that is going to undergo change at a very rapid pace. Next few years, a lot of our organizations will look very different. So I think that is just around the corner, and a lot of the manual things. And by the way, this has happened with every technological jump. It is disruptive in the sense that a lot of things become very different, but there's always more jobs that are created because of these technology jumps than eliminated. So change is what's going to happen. And I think this one, what we're seeing is at a much bigger scale than ever conceived, because I think the compute power is there. What we thought was so hard and expensive is starting to actually become very affordable. And the fact how widely it's being used and commented on, I'm actually ignoring all the negative part because it's fine. Yeah, it's not quite there, but it'll get there. Even what they've achieved so far was not considered doable. And I think in both our personal lives as well as our professional lives, it'll change very rapidly.
Well, on that note, I'm going to open it up to some questions that I've seen come through that we know change is the normal. We don't exactly know what all those are going to be. But a couple of things that some of the attendees have asked. One is the biggest issue in succession planning is getting the business to own the process. How to use data to tackle this issue. And I'll start, but I'd love to hear your feedback on this. We have recently placed a CEO into a business in APAC. And he said, I'm pretty certain we're going to have some gaps in terms of our capabilities of what we need to do going forward. And I went and I tried to say, help me understand what we have. And he said there was no single source of truth. Nobody owned that question, right? I got a little bit of information over here, a little bit of information over there. I was trying to think about how I could, use talent from another part of the organization. And there was just no visibility to it. So I think this question around how do you get somebody to own it? But if there's if I can't have insight into what exists, it's pretty hard for me to own it, right? And I think that's what data is doing. If you measure all of your leaders, all of your talent consistently, and this can be done digitally, to your point, where we used to only do interviews, we now have digital diagnostics. Where we used to only use what I say, we now have AI to make inferences and really fill out the picture, right? And so if you can consistently measure this, then it actually becomes pretty easy for the business to own it because they have an asset sitting in front of them that they can understand. We just talked to a CEO of a bank the other day, and he is all over this idea. We're going through transformation. I need to know where the pockets of talent sit that are going to help us lead this forward. And I've got to have data on that. So I think, the fundamental question is, if you don't have that data, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. It's very hard for the business to own it because then it's what's in people's heads or people's beliefs. But let me open that up to you. How do you think the business can do a better job, or data can better serve the business in terms of owning succession or owning talent decisions?
Great question. One myth is, or concern that we see across organizations. Concern is exactly, it starts there. I don't think I have all the data I need to make more data-driven decisions. Most enterprises do have the data. It's just sitting all over the place. And everything that we do, if you think about all the promotions, evaluations, performance, work, etc., it is all happening out of HRIS systems. So you think your HRIS system would have all this information. They don't. They barely have 10% of all the useful data that is sitting in other systems. Because all of us as employees, our work is getting captured somewhere. Engineers' work is getting captured in Jira or GitHub. A sales marketing person's work is getting captured in a CRM system like Salesforce. So the key here is to bring in the flow of work information into our system so that we can get to a reasonable view. Second step there is, nobody will ever have complete data. And if you're going to go down this data journey, no need to wait to have perfect data because nobody has it. We start filling in the blanks. And there are a number of ways of actually bootstrapping that, right? Because if employees are being rewarded by promotion and opportunities because we have a better sense of what they're capable of doing, that will drive others to actually do it. If by learning certain things you are getting promoted and now you're being given leadership opportunities, others will also follow suit, right? So there are a number of ways to actually get people to share more and more information about both their aspirations and what they would love to do inside your company. And the third piece is to do it with transparency. This should not be a black box or I know you, that's why you're doing this. It comes from, we think this is what we know, so you're a great fit for this role. But for employees, you can share that I think you need to actually work on ABC to be a great fit for this GM role. That opens up the aperture very quickly because then the individual can say, yeah, but I did learn that there, or I did do that there, right? So if we don't have the data, you tell us where you have the data. And our methodology is trust, but validate. And with our system, we'll be able to get other corroborating data points and then fine, let's go ahead and do it. So now you're building both trust with each other as well as the thinking that the company is looking out for opportunities for me. And let me just help the company make better informed decisions. And this we have seen so many times because look at all the cuts that are happening all over the place. Every company is cutting. And today I'm actually in London. One of our clients actually shared how they used our platform for redeployment. And he was more happy about that than anything else, that they didn't have to let go of these people because those roles were available somewhere else where their skills could be used, right? And then he started to actually give me what you had asked for, ROI. He rattled off ROI also. And that's all because the data is there to make a better decision and the transparency is there. It's not like AI is perfect or magic. It's just help us make better decisions. And then it's a team game.
I love the comment of don't wait for it to be perfect. Start somewhere and get better and get better. And starting somewhere will start that trust that you just talked about, right? Having any level of conversation. I remember people talking about succession planning and you'd be hours into a conversation trying to figure out where somebody's going to go and no one paused to ask the employee, do you want that kind of role? Do you want to take that on? Would you be willing to relocate or, whatever the considerations are? We forget to ask the simplest questions that actually can be incredibly insightful for us and make an employee feel heard and recognized. Yep. One last question, and then we'll close it out. came through, how relevant are skills versus experiences for at the C-suite level. Here's what the data has shown us. When you get towards the very top of an organization, one, you've already demonstrated potential to be able to take on big, broad, complex roles. The second thing is the competencies and the behaviors you've generally developed to a certain level. Everybody's still going to have their relative pluses and minuses, but they're generally at a level of competence or beyond. What is critical is, how do I make the decision in my context, right? So if I know this person's got potential, or if I know that, again, their behaviors are pretty darn good, now it's about the context of what we're trying to accomplish. And I always think about, think if you need to hire a chief revenue officer, all of your candidates are probably good at driving for results, building high performing teams, creating strategies and executing that. But there's a really big difference between somebody who has grown big businesses through M&A activity or expansion into new markets versus somebody who's led turnarounds and streamlined offerings and created better brand awareness. So even though we come with some core behaviors that we're really good at, the context and the experiences in which we've driven a business forward are quite different. And it's not that one's better than the other. The question is simply, what aligns to what you need me to accomplish? What aligns to what's going to be best for the business here? So that's how I think about skills versus experience. Skills are critical to gather and build over time. But at the end of the day, when you get to a certain level of leadership, we need to make sure that what you can drive for the business, achieve for the business, is aligned to what the strategy actually is. And Kamal, I don't know if you'd add anything to that.
No, totally agree. I think the only two things to add is, and I think one of the folks here also commented, the experience is not learning, is not expertise. Totally right. The way we look at it is, we have our experiences and we have our skills. How does that, depending on the context, add up to what we are capable of doing? And the second part is, regardless of what we think somebody's capable of doing, what are their aspirations? Because we should never underestimate the drive of an individual, right? If they want to do it and they have enough, and it looks like an investment/risk worth taking, I think we should go for it. And I see this all over the place. I mean, Citibank has a new CEO, I think last year or 2 years ago when she was made the CEO. She's run part of Citibank for a while, but clearly not run all of Citibank. Right? So clearly there's a point where you will need to step up on both sides. And I think today we are sort of looking at so many macro issues. I don't think anybody has run organizations at the top with all of these things going on at the same time. So everybody has a learning curve ahead. And I think the thing that I'm actually admiring more and more is people's ability to learn and have that humbleness about it, that there's always something else that will come up that we don't know, right? Perfection will come when we are looking at the rearview mirror. Maybe it's there, maybe it doesn't, but who cares? I think the human spirit and resilience and drive is just fantastic. And it's continued. I mean, last few years, we've seen that repeatedly.
Well, I think that is a perfect note to end on. I want to thank all of our attendees who have joined us for this lively conversation about technology helping to navigate change. I hope you all left with a strong conviction that there's a path forward. There's a way to integrate data and science applied to strategy so you can really view your talent as an asset. And Kamal, a huge thank you to you for sharing your knowledge and being a thought leader and a disruptor in this space. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a new book now, Deep Talent. Get it from Amazon, 28th.
Fantastic.